Welcome to session 3 of Unit 508 on project management. We've already looked in this unit at roles and responsibilities. We've looked at tools and techniques used in setting up and in risk analysis. We've looked at budgets and a cost-benefit analysis. And we've identified the main documents that we would have come across so far, and we'll be adding to that as we go through, as we will be with looking at some of the tools and techniques. We're now going to start focusing on managing and evaluating the project. So the main aim of this session is to know how to manage a project. And by the end of it, you should be able to describe the information used to monitor and communicate with the project's progress, explain how to manage resources and timescales in accordance with the project plan, describe the process for identifying, managing and mitigating risks and issues, and we've already looked at the process for identifying them, assess the potential impact of changes to project scope, schedule, finance, risk, quality and resources, and we'll touch back on a couple that we've already started on, which is the project management tools and that are used in different phases of the project. We've looked at it from the setting up sort of stage, and we'll start to see how we use those tools and the different risk analysis tools and techniques available. We've looked at them for identifying it and analysing the risks, and we'll look at how we manage those risks as we go through the process. So let's get started. And first of all, let's just outline the main areas that we need to manage if we're going to manage a project effectively. And they are monitoring the project schedule and its performance, managing the resources and the timescales effectively, identifying, managing and mitigating against risks, and dealing with changes as they occur and understanding the impact. So we'll have a look at those in a little bit more detail. But firstly, let's consider how we're going to monitor that and why, because regular monitoring of the project schedule and therefore its performance is probably key to all those other aspects that we just talked about. Because if we monitor the schedule well, then we're probably going to notice any possible problems with activity coordination problems, so things not being tied together. We're probably going to notice any resource conflicts, any cost overruns, any changes that are needed, and we're probably going to see any risks and be able to plan and mitigate for them. So we've identified that regular monitoring of the performance against the schedule is critical for project success. And to do that, we need to collect, record and evaluate information and ensure it's kept up to date. One of the tools or techniques we can use for that is a work breakdown structure. We briefly mentioned it as part of the project plan, but it breaks the project down into small deliverables that ultimately lead to the project's overall outcome. It's normally in hierarchical order, and it shows a visual display of the overall scope of the project, and it outlines and maps the processes that need to take place. Here's a simple example for a new build construction of a property. And if we add to that some start and end dates for each activity and or record how much of it has been completed, we can start to see how we might be able to track progression against that work breakdown structure. If we use percentage for that record and how much has been completed, we just need to be careful, because percentage is not always a genuine indicator of an activity's progress, because we may have bits that take longer, that aren't as labour intensive, or bits that are more labour intensive but are still very significant. So just be careful with percentages in that. And bringing that all together, we may have some sort of table where we can check our project status by comparing the activity that's actually taken place with the start and end dates and the actual milestones for those planned activities. We see here a table for the first of those activities on there, which was the site prep, which had clear the site as one step, removing the waste as a second, setting out the site. And this has been expanded and now has the person responsible for it, the start date, the actual date it was completed, it actually started, the planned end date and the actual date it ended, plus any comments. So we've combined the activities and the milestones into this, so we can clearly see where things are and track their progress. Another tool that's also utilised regularly in project management to track progress is a Gantt chart. And we see the example here. We've got the same project, we've got the build, we've got the site prep taking week 1 to 3, the areas that are shaded, and the 3 parts of that phase being clear the site week 1, remove the waste week 2, set out the site week 3, and deliverable on the end of week 3. Next phase, purchasing, due at the end of week 5, but we can see that the deliveries 1.2.4 has been extended, so there's obviously going to be a delay in delivery. And our current position is week 4, and we can see that there's a progress report due. So Gantt charts can be used to map these things out and show things in a visual effect. So they're quite useful for communicating it to everybody about where we're up to, what needs to be done, and where they need to get to. Another technique we can use is PERT diagrams. Used to schedule, organise and coordinate tasks, was originally developed by the US Navy in the 50s to manage Polaris submarines, if that's of any interest. But we can use it in our project management to show a timeline by task, clearly defining a precedence, the order they're going to be done in. This example just highlights that the nodes are the milestones, the numbered bits, and the arrows are the activities and the time in between. And again, we can add our example of the building project to that simple example, and it shows, but they come in many forms, and this is a more complicated one, which not only shows the sort of critical paths that you can use for the PERT diagram and all the stages, but it also shows the start date, as we talked about before, the end date, and the duration, and the person responsible for it. When you have them like this, it's very good for sort of showing which are the critical tasks and which are the non-critical. In other words, which ones can be delayed, which ones don't have interdependencies with other ones, so that we can move resources around, perhaps to catch up on overrunning tasks or things. The disadvantage of it is that, compared to a Gantt chart, does not give such a clear message to people about where progress is and what they've got to get finished and where they are. That's more complicated, so it may not be as clear on focusing people's minds on where things need to be done and how they need to be done. Right then, activity now to sort of draw all those things together. There is a worksheet, but this is just details about a written report that you've got to produce. There's no word count, but remember it needs to go into sufficient depth because we're talking at level 5, and use the resources and make sure you're meeting the command verbs such as evaluate, describe. It's all about thinking about project communication, and you can use the project that you identified in session 1 activity where you were asked to talk about a project you've been involved in, or if you didn't have one, you can think generally. And it's all around, there's some questions on the worksheet, but it's all around information and methods used to monitor and communicate project progress and the general communication amongst the project team and stakeholders. So look at that. If you need any further advice, talk to your assessor, and then upload that before you move on to the next session. It's going to take a little bit of research, that one, because that's why I'm making the point about saying about the depth. Think about including enough in there to make sure that it's at a level 5 level.